Hello. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Leonardo Gomez. I'm here at tax senior of the company here at JL Del Rio. And on behalf of the team of JL Del Rio, we wanted to give you a warm welcome to this talk that we think that will help you to understand better the requirements for the invoices for the year 2012. One thing that it's important to mention at the beginning is that this session I'm going to be talking to you, explaining to you all the slides, and it would be important that if you have questions, maybe you could start typing it or writing them in the chat, and at the end of the slide of the presentation, we will take care of these questions. Okay, well, to start basically with the presentation, we think that this is a very important subject considering the changes that the tax legislation is taking care now in 2012. And it will help you to fulfill the new requirements and work properly to avoid penalties. What questions will be answered during our talk? Well, we have different ones, such as what changes are there for invoices in 2012? Another question that we will be considering is how will the transition from the current system to the new one will be carried out? An important thing here, when will this start? Because right now we are working on a scheme, and when will the new one start? This is a question that we will be reviewing during this talk. Another one is how will the electronic invoices will be sent? For instance, the XML file, or is it going to be through an email, or is it going to be a printed form? That's another question that we will consider. And another question, I think this is one of the most important ones, what is the penalties for the taxpayer if they issues or they uses an electronic invoices that does not meet the new requirement? We'll analyze that these new requirements, it's not something that it's an option. It's an obligatory. The government is stating for you to be obligatory. And here an interesting point that we will analyze is that the penalties will be applicable for the two individuals here. The companies who issue wrong invoices or that does not meet tax requirements, there will be a penalty for them. And also there is going to be a penalty for the taxpayer who uses them. For those who make a deduction over those apocryphal invoices, you will have a penalty for that too. And that's going to be answered during the presentation. For instance, a brief summary of the items that we will be discussing during this talk. It's at the beginning we're going to start with a background of what were the reasons of the government for making the changes on the actual laws regarding the electronic invoices. Later on, we will be reviewing the Federal Tax Code and the Miscellaneous Tax Resolution, and we will find established in the laws all the requirements for these new electronic invoices. And in the Miscellaneous Tax Resolution, we're just going to discuss how these resolutions just comes to clarify and add additional information for the electronic invoices. Later on, we will review the new requirements that were added and those who were removed, and the facilities that the government is given to the taxpayer for this 2012 year. Another thing that we will be considering is the penalties and fines that will be cost for the taxpayer if they don't fulfill with these new requirements. And for last, we will have a few examples of the invoices, how they should look, the new ones, and what actions needs the company to take in order them to be able to fulfill with these new requirements. Well, in order for us to have a background, we have a timeline here at the slide that you are watching. And we have that on December 12, 2011, the government the government publishes a decree that modifies and added and removed various federal tax code regulations. In the federal tax code, we found all the requirements and all the specifications for the electronic invoices. So on this decree, they modified the actual or the ones that they had before on the federal tax code, and it establishes that this requirement needed to be fulfilled on January 1st, 2012. However, on December 28th, the government published a miscellaneous tax resolution which stated that these new requirements for the electronic invoices would be could start on July 1st, 2012. This miscellaneous tax resolution, just to have a better background, it's a gathering of various specifications that sometimes it just comes to clarify some articles from the federal tax codes or from other federal tax laws, in which sometimes the articles from the actual federal laws are not very clear. Well, these miscellaneous resolutions, they just come to clarify or to give additional information about the articles that were already written by the government. So in this miscellaneous resolution published on December 28th, the important thing in here is that they mention that the decree that was published before is going to have applicable or will be applicable for July 1st. Later on, the government issues first modifications and second modifications to the miscellaneous tax resolution that had already been published. And in the second one, well, the first one doesn't mention a lot of things about the electronic requirements that we need to fulfill, but the second one, the thing is that it comes to reassure the date of issuing the new requirements, and it reassures you that it will start on July 1st, 2012. So this time, it's the deadline. June 30 would be 2012 would be the last day you will be able to issue the electronic invoices the way you are doing it right now. On starting July 1st, you have to use the new requirements. What were the reasons for the government for making these changes regarding the electronic invoices? Well, in the document that the government prepares, the Senate, the legislators, in the document that they prepare, they put a preface, which is like a paragraph at the beginning of the minute that they prepare, and they explain that the reasons they had for making these changes is basically to simplify the current legislation and the requirements that the invoices must meet. All this simplifying and all these requirements, it's done through the compilation in the tax code to attack. Also, it's done through a tax policy framework that it's clear, simple, and easy to comply with, and it's done through a higher legal security. Basically, what the government wants in here is to have more control over the electronic invoices in order to avoid tax fraud. So, why do we mention the first one, compilation in the tax code? If we move forward to the other slide, we can watch a comparative chart that explains basically what was some facts or some information that were for 2011 and now the ones that we have for 2012. And the interesting point in here is that for 2011, all the requirements for the electronic invoices specification were spread in 27 articles, 24 rules, 11 different laws, regulation, etc. It was very difficult for, if you want to comply with electronic invoices requirements, to start gathering information from this law and then move forward to the other law because it contains some other information. Well, for this year, what the government wants is just to unify everything. This is the reason why in 2012, all the requirements can be found in the Federation Tax Code and in the Miscellaneous Tax Resolution, which we mentioned before. It's interesting to mention that they did make some changes in the requirements for this year 2012. They added new ones, but they also canceled some other ones. But basically what they wanted to do is to unify all the requirements in just one main law and in just one miscellaneous, instead of having all the requirements spread all over the laws. Regarding the reasons for the government for the higher legal security, it's important to mention that the regulations established in the Federation Tax Code regarding electronic invoices prevail over those established in the federal tax laws or any other law. And this comes to reassure or to give more certain legal certainty of the requirements that we're using it, because all the requirements for the electronic invoices, they need to be established in the Federation tax code in order for them to be valid. In 2011, there were spreading different laws. It's not that they were not valid, but they didn't have like that strong validation from the government. And because the Federation tax code here in Mexico, it has the supreme power regarding another laws such as miscellaneous resolutions or whatever other document. And just comes to clarify that now that these requirements are written in the federal tax code, they need to be very valid for you to use. Well, one question that we might think, when do we need to start complying with these new requirements? Well, just as the miscellaneous mentioned, it has to be done on July 1st, 2012, which will be like in the following 2 weeks. I think it will be like the following month, not this Monday, but the following one. You will have to start using the new requirements, because from 2011 until June 2012, until the end of this month, you could still use the requirements mentioned in the Annex 20 that was published by the government on September 2012. Basically, the Annex 20, it's like a couple of details and a specification that shows that your software for issuing electronic invoices needs to comply with. So all this specification in Annex 20 could be used. It's the V that you can find in the slide. It's 2.0 and 3.0. It's the one that was published on September 2010. And the other versions, which is 2.2 and 3.2, is the new one, the one that was published on December 30, 2011. And it establishes that you need to start issuing your electronic invoices with the new requirements starting at the beginning of July 2012. Well, now if we move forward to the main item of this talk, it's the requirement that were added and removed for 2012. First, we're going to consider the things that were removed, and we can find them in the slide that you're watching. It shows, for instance, and these things that were removed from your invoices are not are for the issuer, for the company who issues the invoice. I'm sorry. Something that it's not required anymore, your invoices needs to contain, it's your name or the name of the company who is issuing the invoice and also the tax address. However, your tax ID, it still remains. For instance, if you're going to be the one who is issuing an invoice to your client, you don't have to use your name anymore or your tax address. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be shown in the invoice anymore. However, your tax ID needs to be in the invoice still. Okay, some of the things that were added for the invoices, it's the taxpayer's tax ID. And this is something that you already had to comply with. However, if you're celebrating transactions with general public or foreign residents, you need to use the generic or the standard tax ID established by the government. What do we mean by general public transactions? Well, those are those are the transactions between those who are not properly registered in the government's tax offices, which they don't just have like a tax ID. It could be like an individual taxpayer, informal commerce. For instance, if you go to a store, I don't know, Walmart or whatever store on your own, and you just go there and buy some, your beverages or whatever, you don't ask an invoice for yourself. So you would be considering that the transaction is with general public. You would be considering the general public in there. Well, the law is establishing that your invoices needs to contain your client's tax ID. However, if your client does not have tax ID, which would be the case of general public transactions or a foreign residence that obviously they don't have a tax ID here for Mexican purposes, you need to use a standard one. Which one is the standard one? The following slide shows which one is it. And if we are celebrating operations with general public, we will have to put in our invoice the first one, the excess in here. And if we are celebrating transactions with foreign residents who doesn't have a tax ID, a Mexican one, we have to use this one, the one that is XEXX01010100. That's the one that we would need to be using. Okay, another requirement, and this is a new one that was never been established before, is that you need to put the tax system your taxpayer belongs to according to the income tax law. Here it's important to mention that this one is regarding your information. If you are issuing an invoice to your client, in order to fulfill with this requirement, the invoice that you issue needs to contain the tax system in which you are paying your taxes here in Mexico. Basically, for companies, it's called Title Number 2 for legal entities. That will be the one, the translation in English, but the translation in Spanish is a little bit different, but it's basically the same. It just mentions you that you pay taxes here in Mexico as an entity instead of like an individual taxpayer. And in case, there are some cases that you can use the expression no aplica, which would be the translation for does not apply. Another requirement that your invoices needs to include, this is for special situations. This is basically shown for or established for the foreign residents or the foreign tourists that come here in Mexico and want to request a VAT refund in their country. Well, those invoices that they want to get the refund on the VAT needs to contain the tourist ID, and it's interesting here that it's not very clear what ID you or what information you need to bring in here, but at least it should contain regular information like the name of the foreign tourist, the address, the zip code, the phone number. That would be the ones that we consider that are basically necessary in order to fulfill with this requirement. And also, they want you to be established in the invoice the system that you are using to exit or to enter the country. In case you're flying by plane, it could be you could put in the invoice the airline ticket, or the airline flight, just to make sure that you are getting back to your country, or what medium you're getting back, by bus, by ticket, by air, or whatever other transportation method. Okay, another requirement, it's established, but this one is basically for special situations also, such as, for instance, when we make a donation. These are extra requirements that our invoices needs to contain if we make a donation. For instance, if we're making a donation, the first bullet explains that it needs to be specifically point out of this situation. This means that if we are making a donation to an entity here in Mexico, when we receive the donation, in the description, it needs to contain that we are making a donation of it. The second bullet, it's important in here because it shows or it tells you that you need to include the number and date of the authorization letter or authorization renewal What do we mean by this? Here in Mexico, if a company or a legal entity wants to be able to receive donations, they need to fill out a form. They need to register themselves to the government offices, so they allow them to be able to receive donations. Otherwise, if we make a donation to one of these entities and that one is not legally registered in the government's office, all the donations that we make are not going to be deductible for us. One of the requirements in order for Mexicans, for companies here to be able at tax deductions for a donation, is that the donation needs to be done to an entity that is legally registered to the government, that they are allowed to receive donations. Well, the government wants you here to specify the number that the government gave to this entity legal to receive donations. They want you to include in your invoice the number that they gave to them. And also, when you're dealing with goods that have previously been deducted, we need to specify that the donation that we are doing won't be deductible for tax purposes. What would be an example in here of a donation that we had already been deducted? Well, in these cases, it could be like a car, for instance. We had already taken the deductions through tax depreciation, and later on we want to make a deduction on making a donation to a legal company here allowed to make donations. We wouldn't be able to do so. This is the reason why the government wants you to specify in the invoice that the donation that you are making is not going to be deductible for tax purposes. Another special occasion that could occur is that if we are leasing or renting a building, the invoice needs to contain the property rental and the certificate information. Here in Mexico, I don't know if it's the same in the US, I think it will be the same. You have to pay real estate tax or property tax here in Mexico in order for you to be able to maintain your building your construction. Well, the government wants you, once you pay your real estate tax, they give you the authorization number for it. Well, the government wants you to put that number of the authorization of payment in the invoice that you're going to issue in case you are leasing a building or in case you are receiving or renting a building. The invoice that you receive needs to contain that tax property code. Another requirement that was added is regarding the measuring units to be used in the invoices. For measuring units, we're going to refer to the General Measuring Unit System and the Federal Metric and Normalization Law. I know this sounds like a little bit crazy or a little bit like a tongue twister, but it gives you, those are specification or laws that specifies you what units for measure you could use. And I put some examples in here that could be kilos, liters, units, pieces, because it sounds kind of weird, but at the end of the day, it's just like to try to measure what we are selling. A recommendation that we are considering or that we are giving to our clients in here is that we would like you to try to link your measuring unit to the one that you use for your inventories. For instance, if you are selling whatever pieces in kilos and your inventory, you have it registrations of kilos for whatever article you sell, we are suggesting that the invoices that you issue are in kilos too, just to have a better control over what you are issuing. In case that you are issuing some other specified item that cannot be measured, for instance, I don't know, if we're selling TVs, for instance, we could just describe units or pieces that we are selling in here, or that we are showing in the invoice. What will happen if we render services or allow temporary use of goods? Well, it will be clear that those cannot be measured, right? Well, in this case, we could use the legend no aplica, which is the same as does not apply. And that would be the example, I don't know, for instance, the maquila invoices. Here at the firm, we have a lot of companies who do maquila operations. Well, that invoices, the invoice for the maquila services cannot, since it is a services and cannot be measured by units, you could use the expression does not apply. Another requirement that the government is establishing here for 2012 is that you establish in your invoice your payment method. The payment method here in Mexico can be in cash, can be also in electronic fund transfer, in order checks, debit card or service card, and cash back cards authorized by tax authorities. And those could be like gasoline, food coupons, and some other, the ones that authorize the government. The government wants you to specify the payment method and also to specify at least the 4 digits of the corresponding account or card that is going to be used for the payment. If you're going to receive a transfer fund, an electric transfer fund for your client, it will be important that you type electronic transfer fund in your invoices, and also include the last 4 digits of the account, which is the one you will be receiving the invoice. It's kind of complicated, but it's something that you will need to start asking your clients. What's going to be the payment method for you? What will happen if we're going to receive a payment, if we issue an invoice and it's going to be paid in different methods? Well, in those cases, it would be important that you establish each method of the one that you're going to be paid the invoice on. And it would be separated by commas. As you can see in the example in there, 5630, comma, another 4 digits account of the following payment, comma, another 4 digits. That's what the government wants you to use. And what happens if we don't know how we are going to receive the payment method? Because it's something understandable. Sometimes the client the client we're dealing has a lot of accounts, a lot of payment methods. It's understandable, and the government understands that. In those cases, we could use the word also no identificado, which would be unidentified, not identified payment method, and it is also valid. Okay, one question that we might think in here regarding the payment methods. What would happen if I establish a payment method in the invoice? For instance, if I put electronic fund transfer, and then I put the 4 digits of the bank account, which I was told I was going to receive the payment. And later on, I received the payment from a different bank account. What will happen in those cases? Well, it will be important that we issue another invoices and refers a substitution of the first invoice that we issued. That's what the government wants. They just want to have more certainty of where the money is coming from when they review you by when the government reviews you. So in case we have this situation of we establish in our invoice that it was going to be paid by cash, we would need to make another invoice and clarify in the description that this new invoice substitutes the old one. And it's not something that is wrong if you also add like additional information such as wrongly payment method or whatever other description. It's up to you. But you do need to issue another invoice. Okay, another thing that the government establishes, well, this wasn't actually a new requirement. It just comes to reaffirm what was already established regarding payment in various installments. First of all, what do we understand for payment in various installments? Why don't we read a definition for it? The following slide shows a definition of it, and we read that it will be considered that there are installments when the total amount owed is paid in more than one exhibition, regardless of the amount of each payment and the period agreed on. So if we make a payment, or if we receive a payment, for instance, of an invoice, if we issue an invoice for, I don't know, let's say $100,000, and then we were told that we're going to receive just one payment, and later on we receive different payments, like 50,000 and another day another 50,000, that would be considered that the invoice was issued in various installments. And we need to fulfill certain requirements in here. Well, the boxes that you can see on this slide, it's something that it's established by the government, but just to make it a little bit easier, I will explain it to you. The procedure, in case you receive, yes, in case you're going to issue an invoice and you already know that you're going to receive various installments for the payment. For example, the example that we were mentioning for $100,000, let us split it in 4 payments. We know that we're going to receive 4 payments, 24,000 each one. Okay, it will be important that at the beginning we issue one invoice for the total amount of the operation. And in case we're just going to receive one payment, if we know that we're just going to receive one payment, we need to put in the invoices payment in one exhibition. However, if this same example, if we issue an invoice for $100,000 and we know that we are going to receive 4 payments of 25,000 each, we will need to first issue one invoice for the total amount of the operation, $100,000. Then, later on, we will need to issue an invoice for each installment that we receive. And we need to make reference to the original invoice. For instance, the first invoice would be issued for $100,000, and the first installment that we receive would have to be issued for $25,000, and we would need in here to detail the transfer taxes, the subtotal, and the total amount of the installment that we are receiving, which in this case is $25,000. Let's put just an example, not real numbers, but it would need to be described like $20,000 for subtotal and $5,000 for VAT, and you receive a total invoice for $25,000. Just imaginary numbers. That would be how you need to structure your invoice for those installments. And it also needs to contain in the description that you are making one installment of how many payments you are going to receive. In case, what we are suggesting here is that in case if you do not know how many payments you will receive, it would be better if you could use only like first installment, instead of saying first installment of 20 payments. Or yeah, what we recommend is just to clarify that you are just receiving the first installment or the second installment of the invoice that you originally generated for the total amount of the transaction. That is our suggestions in here. Another requirement that, well, this wasn't basically a new requirement, it's something that was already established. It's the deadline to deliver or to send the invoice to your clients. For instance, if you are issuing your invoice, they must be delivered to your clients the digital invoice. What is the digital invoice? The XML file. The one that your software creates, the XML file, it's the most important one. The printed one are optional, and those are not like, they don't have like they are not as strong as the XML file. It should be the same one. And you need to give your client these invoices within the 3 days to follow the operation. and our least provide them with a printed version of the digital invoice when it is requested. But this is not something that it's obligatory. What it's obligatory, it's for you to send the XML file to your client during the following 3 days, and vice versa. If you are paying for something, you need to receive the invoice within the 3 following days. What it's important here, just to let you know, that these XML files are very important. They're very, very important, and they needed to be kept in, I don't know, a USB or a special file that you have, because this is what the government will like you to review. When they make a review on your tax deduction, this is what they will review. This is the importance of you to have these XML files. Okay, later on, the government is also given some facilities for the taxpayer. And those are, for instance, the first one, it's the possibility of simultaneously use the scheme of CFD and CFDY. If we remember in here, what were the differences between the CFD and CFDI, I'm going to give a brief explanation of them. The scheme of CFD, it's still valid. However, if you are starting to use the electronic invoices, you cannot access to it. If you wanted to be part of the CFD scheme, you needed to start issuing electronic invoices before 2011, which means like until December 2000, the 31st December 2010, if you issued your first electronic invoices, you could apply to this scheme of CFD. It was a voluntary scheme, but it has a lot of benefits. The ones that are already in this scheme can confirm this, and one of the benefits is that you are allowed to issuing your own invoices. You have control over your seals to request invoices. You have control over your folios for the invoices. But there is also the obligation of the monthly report for the electronic invoices that you issued. And it has a lot of benefits. And the CFDI, which it's the one that you apply if you started to use electronic invoices in 2011, which means that you did not comply in time for the CFD scheme. Well, you lost it. You lost the benefits. And now what the CFDI means is that you have to use the electronic invoices through a supplier. You cannot do it by your own terms or own mediums. The beneficiency here is that you don't have to issue a monthly report because the supplier of this service is going to take care of it. But basically what the government wants is to push everyone to the CFDI scheme. It's what they want. But in here, they are giving you the possibility to use simultaneously both schemes. This option only applies to the one that are already in the CFD scheme. Well, what is the beneficial in here, we could think? Well, the beneficial in here, it's basically, for instance, if you're issuing invoices in CFD and suddenly, I don't know, for whatever reasons, your software stops working or breaks down, what will happen? I mean, you cannot stop issuing invoices to your clients for 5 days in order to be able to fix it, right? Well, the government is allowing you to use to contact a third party, a supplier for these services, so he can aid you or help you during this difficult situation. That would be just like an example, or also if you started with CFD and later on you know it or you realize that, you know what, it's too complicated for me, this is not for me, I'd rather someone to be able to take care of my things or my electronic invoices, well,